Welcome to episode 5 of the Fantasy Show by Amanda Khan and Evan Garber. And today we are going to talk about the Premier League Game Week 1, the disappointments, and the players who will do consistently well, or who we think will do consistently well through Game Week 2, and so on. And then we are just going to be naming players for football and giving our opinions on if they're overrated, underrated, or properly rated, or I guess properly ranked. So now, for Premier League, off the top of my head, the disappointments were easily, like Gabriel Jesus. So many people started him, and all the points he got were the minutes played. And like Liverpool, for example, Trent Alexander-Arnold got beat. Van Dijk didn't play well against Fulham, who came out of relegation last season, and they tied against one of the best teams, not just in the Premier League, but one of the best teams in soccer. So that was also surprising. Then Manchester United against Brighton. I mean, Manchester United are in such a deep hole. They had so much chemistry without Cristiano Ronaldo. I still like Ronaldo. I mean, to be honest, it's not his fault, because once Mason Greenwood had that assault and sort of fell off and lost his spot on the team, Martial left on loan, Paul Pogba is now gone, and now, I mean, Manchester's defense too. Rafael Varane's the only consistent player, and then Harry Maguire, he's just not a good defender anymore. I don't like making episodes opinionated, but you can see the way he plays, how he plays. You don't know what he's doing on the pitch. David De Gea, I understand. I mean, goalies aren't going to have clean sheets every week. But in Eric Ten Hag's first game, this is not a good look, because Cristiano Ronaldo only played 37 minutes amid these transfer rumors. And like I said, De Gea is not going to get a clean sheet every time. But my point is, they played Brighton. It's not a must-win game. I understand it's the first game of the season and players might be rusty. But this is the perfect game to, warm up your legs, warm up the practices against Brighton, who I'm sure everyone can agree aren't a huge threat at all to the big name teams. So I don't know if you can call Ronaldo a disappointment, because Ten Hag was vocal about not using Ronaldo. But Harry Kane didn't score as much as we thought. Jesus didn't score as much as we thought. The one player who I think will do well over the course of this season, all Fulham players did well. I don't know if they can carry it through a full season. I would say Zinchenko on Arsenal. He's really good. He's a main part of their team, it seems like. So we'll see. Now we'll get on to fantasy football. So now that we have Em back on the podcast, who is a player that, just name a player off the top of your head, either in the first, second, or third round. Just name any football player.
Start off with Christian McCaffrey.
That, I feel like, that honestly, that number 2, I feel like where he's ranked at number 2 is I'll go overrated. Because as I mentioned on the last fantasy show, if you get McCaffrey at 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't think he'd fall to 7. So 4 through 6, that's good value for McCaffrey. That's properly rated. Now that he's ranked number 2 with his injury history, And yes, he did say he's his best as he ever once was. Every athlete says that. But now he's ranked at number 2. I'd say that's why he's overrated at number 2. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But we all know that if he can stay healthy, which is obviously one of the biggest ifs in football,
Yeah.
we know that he more than likely will be the number 1 player in fantasy this year. But obviously, he always gets injured, so it's not very likely to happen. But after 2 years of injuries, it's hard to stay at the same level that Christian McCaffrey was producing at, especially when you have a better team around him in Carolina. But I still think he will be one of the best players in fantasy if he does not get injured again.
Yeah, and I'm reading his fantasy outlook on ESPN. After not missing a single game and playing 85% of the snaps during his first 3 NFL seasons, he's only played 10 games over the last 2 seasons. I mean, that shows you he was very healthy and very productive. He was amazing, and he wouldn't only be the best player in fantasy, he's one of the best running backs in the league or something. That's the part where the Panthers are missing. That's why fantasy managers who take a risk on him, they take a risk on him because they think if he gets back to that level, that automatically elevates your fantasy. Let's go with some people that drafted players with the risk. I'd say not really the risk, but the name is probably like, let's look at quarterbacks, for example. What round do you think is acceptable to draft a quarterback?
Obviously, you shouldn't draft a quarterback first or second round, like especially with the production that running backs typically give you, and even some wide receivers, like top wide receivers like Cup, Jefferson, and Devontae Adams, they all deserve to be first, second round too. Honestly, it really depends. Like sure, I don't know. I think they should go like around 5 or so, round 5. That way you can get your 2 running backs or 2 wide receivers or something, and maybe like a Kelsey if he's there, and then you can get your quarterback. That's how it should honestly go. But obviously, if you see someone taking a quarterback right out, like in the first round or second round, you might want to consider taking a quarterback just in case that all the quarterbacks don't get taken off the board too quickly.
And I'll just throw out a name out there that everyone's high on, and rightfully so. I mean, in our league, this quarterback was the first quarterback drafted off the board literally with the last pick of the 3rd round. Justin Herbert. Do you think he's overrated, underrated, or properly rated in fantasy?
That one's kind of tough because obviously we know how electric that offense is, especially how electric Herbert is. But you also have Austin Eckler, who is supposed to be one of the better, if not the best running back in fantasy as well. Obviously, we have that because of the passing game that he's involved in, but also because of the run game too. And I think honestly, I think it's a pretty good rating for what he is. Especially with that defense, they're going to be on the field a lot. The offense will be that stacked defense. You would expect that to happen. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty fair, but to go as early as he did in our fantasy draft, that's just insane.
I mean, you mentioned the player. What do you think about Eckler being number 2 or 3 in fantasy, being ranked like that?
I mean, it's not terrible. I still think it's slightly overrated, especially with when you can easily name three guys ahead of him: Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and CMC when healthy. But I mean, with the production that he gets, especially in the passing game and the run game, I think it's very, very good. And like I said, he'll be on the field a lot with that stellar defense.
Yeah, and I mean, like, may in our league, for example, obviously you had Jonathan Taylor go number one, and just in terms of running backs, obviously Jonathan Taylor number one, and then I believe Cup went number two in our league, but then Derrick Henry was drafted third, perhaps because of McCaffrey's injury risk. And then I drafted McCaffrey at number 4, and Eckler went to 5. So I feel like, I mean, Eckler's underrated at the same time. When you look around the league, he's underrated at the same time. But I feel like mid to late first round is a fair rank for him, but not 2 or 3 in my opinion. So he's kind of underrated and overrated at the same time. If that makes sense. So with that, thank you for tuning in to episode 5 of the Fantasy Show with Amanda Carney and Evan Garber. Make sure to tune in next week for either episode 60 of Everything Sports with Amanda and Evan, or if you're a fan of the Fantasy Shows, episode 6. And have a great week.